Number of people being evicted from their homes because of this pandemic. They just can't pay rent. So despite action by the governor to protect those affected by the pandemic, they're still finding themselves in a bind. Heather Crawford joining us to talk a little bit more about that.
That's right, Anthony. This is a topic that is affecting so many Floridians, and a recent executive order by President Trump is likely to do little to slow things down. On your sides, David Jones tonight tells us what makes this new version of the moratorium different and how it's already having an effect on evictions here locally.
I haven't seen a situation where this many families have been at risk for eviction for quite a long time.
It was the last week in July when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed an executive order extending the statewide eviction moratorium. On the order's face, struggling renters and homeowners should be relieved. So why are eviction cases now piling up?
We are starting to see clients who have been served with lawsuits.
Mary DeVries is with nonprofit Jacksonville Legal Aid. She says prior versions of the moratorium were more general, freezing eviction proceedings as a whole.
They did what they were supposed to do, and they did stop eviction. So we got a lot of calls, but not necessarily a lot of evictions because there were no evictions going on.
This newest version of the order, which expires September 1st, stops eviction proceedings only when the proceeding is due to non-payment of rent by a tenant who's been affected by the COVID-19 emergency, allowing for evictions not due to non-payment of rent to continue. And now the tenant has to prove financial loss, which is directly tied to coronavirus.
Before, there were no evictions allowed, period. It didn't matter if you defaulted before COVID.
Tampa-based attorney Ryan Torrens specializes in foreclosures and evictions.
They can try to submit documentation to the court and to ask for a stay of the eviction, but if their case didn't come about because of COVID, meaning their case was filed before COVID, they're probably going to have a pretty small chance on that.
And it's a visible difference. Eviction filings have already jumped. In Duval County, more than 200 eviction cases were filed in the first week of August alone. In fact, nearly 100 were filed Monday of that week, the first full business week since the moratorium was extended. DeVries says that number is on par with eviction filings pre-pandemic. To help with the burden, Legal Aid set up a free tool on their website. You fill in information about your case, and response documents are generated to begin your defense in court, which has to happen within 5 days of being served.
We foresee that we're not going to be able to serve every tenant who needs assistance with an eviction lawsuit. It's a lot of information to keep in mind for a tenant when they're trying to prevent homelessness.
In Jacksonville, David Jones, First Coast News, on your side.